Time is running out. The UN Climate Authority's dire warning on global warming. Also tonight, calls for a review of a popular weed killer suspected of causing cancer. A big song and dance as New South Wales backs a horse racing promotion on the sales of the Opera House. And switching sides, Richmond signs Tom Lynch as AFL Trade Week kicks off. Good evening, Ian Henderson with ABC News. The UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned there's no time to waste moving to a low emissions future. It's handed down a report by more than 90 scientists and drawing on 6,000 pieces of research. And it concludes millions of people will be in danger if global warming isn't stopped at 1.5 degrees. Here's our National Environment reporter, Michael Slezak.
In a busy world, the effects of climate change can seem like an issue to deal with tomorrow. But today, the world's most respected body on climate science has delivered a warning.
If action is not taken, it will take the planet into an unprecedented climate future.
The IPCC examined the difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees of global warming. The world has already warmed by about 1 degree since the start of the Industrial Revolution. That's mostly been caused by the burning of fossil fuels, things like coal and petrol. Scientists say if we keep emitting greenhouse gases at the rate we currently are, we'll breach the 1.5 degree threshold by 2040, and we'll breach the 2 degree threshold by 2065. If we want to halt warming at 1.5 degrees, they say we need to halve our carbon emissions by 2030, and we need to completely reduce them to zero by 2050.
The difference between a 1.5 and a 2 degree temperature rise is really quite large.
For example, over areas like Sydney and Melbourne, we will see 50-degree days where we've never seen them before.
Humans have never seen an ice-free Arctic, but at 2 degrees that will happen once a decade, compared to once a century at 1.5 degrees. And stopping warming at that level will save 10 million people from the impacts of rising seas.
So if you can think of what we're already experiencing, put that on steroids, you're looking at that sort of climate at 1.5 and even far worse at 2 degrees.
To stop warming at 1.5 degrees, the report says coal needs to be all but phased out by about 2050.
Emissions per capita in Australia are at their lowest level in decades. And that's what we're achieving. But at the end of the day, we want to ensure that electricity prices are lower.
The IPCC authors hope their warning isn't ignored.
It also comes with some wishful thinking, that the messages that this report conveys are being taken up and that the urgency of the issue is being seen because climate change is shaping the future of our civilization.
A future the scientists say could still be changed. Michael Slezak, ABC News.
It's emerged Australia's pesticide regulator hasn't reviewed the world's most popular weed killer for decades, despite global concerns about its safety. 3 years ago, the World Health Organisation's Cancer Agency concluded the chemical glyphosate was probably carcinogenic to humans. And as Stephanie March reports, it's the key ingredient in Monsanto's Roundup products.
For decades, ads for the world's most popular weed killer have convinced gardeners Roundup is safe and effective. But in America, more than 9,000 people are suing, claiming chemical giant Monsanto's flagship Roundup products contributed to their cancer. John Barton is one of them. He sprayed Roundup on his California cotton farm for decades.
After I got done during the day, my Levi's would be soaking wet, my boots would be wet, my socks would be wet.
Now he's got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and he blames Roundup.
They should have warnings that let people make that, decision for themselves whether they want to use the product or not.
The company insists Roundup does not cause cancer.
It is the safest herbicide that's ever been developed. It has just an amazing record of not just productivity and use, but also the extent to which it has been examined and scrutinized and studied over 40 years.
Four Corners can reveal Australia's pesticide regulator hasn't formally reviewed the active ingredient in Roundup, glyphosate, in more than 2 decades.
Our conclusion is that any risks associated with glyphosate can be managed appropriately and that the product remains safe to use.
In the past 3 years, the industry lobby group CropLife Australia has contributed more than $100,000 to political parties. In 2014, CropLife bragged about getting federal parliament to remove a requirement that would have forced regular reapproval of chemicals like glyphosate.
We won't make just donations to political parties. We're an apolitical organisation, but we do participate and support any conferences or events where agriculture will be talked about.
They're paying to have influence, and we're seeing this across a whole range of industries, and we fundamentally believe that the policy table should not be the subject of industry interference.
Cancer Council Australia is calling for a thorough and independent review of glyphosate. Stephanie March, ABC News.
The Andrews government has made a pitch to Catholic and independent schools, offering them access to hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade facilities and remove asbestos. And as Richard Willingham reports, they've welcomed the initiative.
Back to where it all began. Premier Daniel Andrews visited his old Catholic primary school in Glenroy. The message for parents: non-government schools will share in $400 million of government funding for upgrades if Labor wins the November poll.
The vast majority of this funding will in fact go to Catholic schools. It'll be low-fee, parish-type primary schools, regional Catholic colleges.
Over the next 4 years, the government is expecting an extra 90,000 Victorian students. A third of those will go to a non-government school. The fund can also be used for cladding and asbestos removals and will require some contribution from the school.
One of the priorities of this fund will be building new schools in our growth corridors.
This is a recognition by the government about choice, parents' choice to choose where they want to send their child to school.
His opponent was in Swan Hill, pledging to fix the local hospital.
This hospital's gone past its use-by date. It needs a serious rebuild. That's why we're committing the $44 million to do that.
With less than 50 days before the election, a new poll shows Daniel Andrews with an election-winning lead. On the primary vote, Labor is scoring 35.9%, with the Coalition on 38.8%. Potential kingmakers, the Greens, are on almost 11%.
I worry about creating jobs, building schools, getting on and offering Victorians that choice.
It's like the lottery. Some are good, some are bad.
Party strategists know that this election will be decided by just a handful of seats. The biggest problem for the Coalition is its primary vote. To be competitive, it needs to be in the low 40s. But with the first votes to be cast in a little over a month, neither side is taking anything for granted. Richard Willingham, ABC News, Melbourne.
Authorities in Indonesia fear the death toll from the Sulawesi earthquake and tsunami may swell by many thousands more. It currently stands at 1,900, but whole neighbourhoods were obliterated in the disaster and another 5,000 people are listed as missing. The government is considering turning the worst affected areas into mass graves and leaving them untouched. Children have now started returning to school and roll calls will help determine just how many of them have survived. In the US, 20 people have died in a car crash involving a stretch limousine which was taking a group of friends to a birthday party. The limousine drove through a stop sign at the end of a highway in New York State and ploughed into a parked car, killing 2 pedestrians. The driver and all 17 passengers died, including newlyweds and 4 sisters.
You can't wrap your head around such a tragedy where you have 4 of your daughters die.
It's America's deadliest road accident in nearly a decade. A storm of protest has followed New South Wales' decision to allow a horse racing promotion to be emblazoned across the sails of Sydney's Opera House tomorrow night. In just 24 hours, a petition opposing the move has attracted more than 185,000 signatures, and critics are calling on the state's Heritage Council to step in.
If Alan Jones's plan was to promote a horse race, it worked.
And Prime Minister Morrison is with me. Good morning.
Good morning, Al.
The two men are on the same page.
It's not like they're painting it on there. I mean, it's the lights flashing up there for a brief moment of time. So, look, I just don't understand why we tie ourselves up in knots about these things.
And there's no argument from the Premier.
The Opera House should also be used for promoting major events in New South Wales.
This is the image that will be splashed across the sails tomorrow night. As the draw is held, the barrier number will appear, so too will the jockey silks. The Premier insists it's a pared-back version. But the Conservation Management Plan says the Sydney Opera House exterior should not be regarded as a giant billboard or a commercial advertising opportunity.
The gambling lobby, particularly in New South Wales, is the equivalent of the National Rifle Association in America. It literally has politicians in the palm of their hand.
Bill Shorten appears to be having a bob each way. He supports horse racing, but questions the use of this Sydney landmark.
The Opera House is not a billboard. It's a thing of great beauty. It's part of our national treasure and deserves the respect that comes with it.
This extraordinarily damaging proposal is directly contrary to the Cultural Management Plan adopted for the Opera House. That's why we've called upon the Heritage Council to issue an urgent stop work order.
The Opera House, under the requirements with the UNESCO and the World Heritage listing, not only does it have to be physically protected, but it has to be presented properly.
And then there's the issue of public opinion. An online petition opposing the move has continued to gain pace with more than 185,000 names. There are real questions here whether the Premier, by approving the projection tomorrow night, has misread public sentiment. Today she doubled down, brushing aside growing opposition. The coalition government has made this mistake before. The difference now is it has very little political capital to spare. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
Recent research has found fewer and fewer children are walking or riding to school. And as Joanna Crothers reports, parents' fears for their children's safety are a big part of the problem.
The school drop-off and pick-up is causing more than traffic jams.
It's very concerning. Children are really missing out if they don't walk or cycle.
In the 1970s, half of all primary students were walking to school. But in Victoria, it's dropped to a third. And fear is a factor. Nearly half the parents recently surveyed were too worried to let their kids make their own way.
When I was young, I made my own way home, but I think times have changed. And so I'd prefer that they were taken home.
I'm not yet confident enough to let him come home on his own.
Some parents are concerned about stranger danger or road safety, but the car has also become a very, very convenient way to travel.
As the number of children getting 60 minutes of exercise a day plummets, the advice to parents is make the morning trek to school part of their daily routine.
So on the weekends, maybe walk to school with your kids, get them to know the routes, get them to know where the traffic lights are.
If habits don't change, it's predicted 1 in 3 children will be overweight or obese by 2025. In this inner city suburb of Melbourne, location makes incidental exercise easy.
Well, it's so close. I don't have to get them into the car and then find a park and then get out of the car.
And the kids are a lot fitter because of it.
And I want to beat my mum in steps.
But having time to get those number of steps up each day isn't possible for every family.
No, because our house is a bit of a distance from here.
They have to go to shopping centre first and then catch a bus from there and then from there walk another half kilometre, so it seems all a bit too much.
Making the time to step towards a healthier future.
I've done 1,245.
I've done 1,355.
Joanna Crothers, ABC News.
Still to come this hour, fears for one of Australia's most popular tourist destinations.
It is meant to be a coastal oasis, but Cable Beach is crowded with cars and camels.
So the worst case scenario, of course, is that someone is seriously injured or, God forbid, killed on Cable Beach.
That's coming up.
Violence is escalating on the border between Israel and Gaza. The Islamic militant group Hamas governs Gaza and is stepping up its protests and attacks. In response, Israel is sending in more troops. And as Eric Torchek reports, the death toll is starting to rise again.
What began as weekly marches on the Gaza border are now almost daily games of cat and mouse between Israeli soldiers and people trying to breach the fence, with deadly consequences. The protesters are calling for an end to Israel's blockade of Gaza, where the economy has collapsed and living conditions are dire.
They see no future at the moment, and they are no longer able to survive this deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza.
But among the civilians are militant units controlled by Hamas, whose aim is to breach the border and damage Israeli military installations. Israeli fire, tear gas and airstrikes have injured more than 20,000 people and killed around 200 since the end of March. In the last few weeks, the death rate has practically doubled, and at least 12 people have died in the last 10 days. Both Hamas and Israel say they want to avoid another major conflict, but Hamas is increasing its attempts to breach the border and encouraging more people to protest, while Israel is upping troop numbers, armour and weaponry as conditions here get worse. Now, Israeli communities close to the border are feeling the effects too.
The smoke is very poison, and of course it's very hard to breathe it, and it's not good for the health. And they try to cover all the villages with smoke.
More reason for both sides to find a solution. Eric Twarchek, ABC News, Gaza.
The president of Turkey is demanding answers over allegations that a journalist was killed in Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul. Jamal Khashoggi wrote columns for a number of newspapers, including The Washington Post, and was a high-profile critic of the Saudi Crown Prince.
Jamal Khashoggi hasn't been seen since he entered Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul on Tuesday. And as speculation about his whereabouts mounts, the Turkish president has taken an interest.
I am following it personally, and we will let all the world know the outcome of the investigation.
Khashoggi entered the consulate to get marriage papers, while his Turkish fiancée waited outside. She later raised the alarm when he never returned. His friends believe he was murdered inside the building.
What was explained to us is this: he was killed. Make your funeral preparations.
Khashoggi has been living in self-imposed exile in the US after criticising the Saudi government's reform program under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Also known as MBS, the prince has moved to modernise the economy, but has cracked down on internal dissent. Activists, writers and scholars have been arrested. Dozens of princes and senior officials were detained in Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton in November as part of a purge against graft and disloyalty. The Saudis say accusations of a hit squad are baseless, and to offer proof took journalists around the consulate, even opening cupboards to show Khashoggi was not hidden there.
We're working to search for him and we're worried about his case.
Security camera vision around the consulate and travel records have revealed few clues as to the mysterious disappearance, which has the potential to strain the already tense relationship between Turkey and the kingdom. Michael Troy, ABC News.
Authorities in China have confirmed they've detained the head of Interpol, a Chinese national who vanished after returning there recently. China's new anti-corruption body says it's investigating Meng Hongwei for allegedly accepting bribes as well as undefined political transgressions. His wife, Grace Meng, told reporters at Interpol's headquarters in France that his final text messages warned that he was in danger. Using his Interpol phone, he sent her an image of a knife 4 minutes after a message saying, "Wait for my call," but she said that call never came. ANZ Bank's share price took a hit today after it announced hundreds of millions of dollars in customer compensation payments in the wake of the Banking Royal Commission. And as Alan Kohler reports, that dragged down the broader market as well.
ANZ revealed today that it expects to be paying $374 million in customer compensation. But there are a few things to note about this. First, only 57% of that money, or $214 million, actually gets to the customers. The rest of it is the cost of going through all the files to work out how much to pay. Second, all the lawyers needed to deal with the Royal Commission have cost $55 million, which means that the total cost of all this, at $215 million, exceeds the actual compensation. And finally, these are pre-tax amounts. They're tax deductible, of course, so your contribution to the cost of ANZ's Royal Commission blowout is $97 million. ANZ shares dropped 2.5% on the news, and other banks also fell in anticipation of something similar. But more importantly, the miners fell in line with global markets because US interest rate expectations are now being ratcheted up, and so is the trade war rhetoric with China. So the overall drop of 1.3% by the All Ordinaries was the biggest since March this year. Accounting software firm MYOB jumped nearly 20% following a $2.6 billion, $3.70 per share takeover approach from private equity Goliath KKR. Well, actually, it's one of those preliminary, non-binding indications of interest, so a maybe bid. The fall here today was part of a general sell-off around the world, starting in Europe and London on Friday and culminating in a 3% drop in Shanghai today. Likewise, commodities are all lower, apart from gold, and the Australian dollar is roughly steady tonight at 70.6 US cents. Now, as you can see, the currency has stayed in a tight, declining trading band for most of this year. If it keeps this pattern up, it'll be in the 60s around about later this week. And that's finance.
The AFL's trade period began today with several highly fancied players reportedly on the move. However, only a few trades were sealed on day one, though Richmond formally secured the services of Tom Lynch via free agency.
Tom Lynch is finally in yellow and black, and he's got to get used to his new surroundings at Punt Road.
Fair few more media here, for starters.
The Suns will receive pick 3 in the national draft as compensation for the 25-year-old who has joined the Tigers on a 7-year deal after a year of speculation about his future.
I think from outside looking in, they've got something really special, and it's great to be part of that.
Lynch won't be the only player swapping jumpers in October. The AFL trade period has begun and everyone is fair game. Big names are tossed up as either trade targets or stars who want to move on. But after missing out on Eagles star Andrew Gaff, North Melbourne can attest, until it's on paper, nothing is certain.
Disappointing that we didn't get him over the line. So, hopefully we'll be able to knock over a couple of ones that have obviously wanted to come.
The Kangaroos are now aiming to secure Port Adelaide's Jared Polec, among others. Melbourne forward Jesse Hogan's future remains in limbo after he toured Dockers headquarters.
We did speak to Fremantle, so we've had one chat at least with them, talking about the hypotheticals around Jesse.
Fremantle's Lachie Neale has been linked to Brisbane, and there's speculation Gold Coast's Stephen May could also be on the move.
We'd love to have a conversation, but obviously respect his contract at the Gold Coast Suns.
While Giants midfielder Dylan Shiel is of interest to several Victorian clubs. The first deal of the official period saw Geelong forward Lincoln McCarthy join Brisbane. It will be the first of many as clubs line up their targets.
There's a lot of work, obviously, that gets done prior to today kicking off. We're going through our due diligence on a lot of stuff.
The challenge for every club, with a firm eye on a premiership in 2019 and beyond. Ben Lisson, ABC News, Melbourne.
Australia has fought its way back into the first cricket test against Pakistan in Dubai. Pakistan's opening bats dominated most of day one, but Australia's bowlers hit back with late wickets. At lunch on day 2, Pakistan was 4 for 329. Peter Siddle, playing his first test in nearly 2 years, has taken 2 wickets.
Keen to avoid another long day in the field, and with Pakistan resuming at 3 for 255, Australia had the old ball reversing early in their favour to start day 2.
Straight away, finally for Australia. Now one shaping away from Pete Siddle.
Scoring was proving difficult, with some tight bowling and an ageing ball helping to restrict the run rate. It took a rare moment of aggression to bring up the 300 for the home side.
And goes all the way.
The test didn't begin well for Australia, who were forced to bowl first on a flat and lifeless pitch.
Yeah, I think we would have had a bat first, but not to worry. We'll just have to start well with the ball and get a couple of early wickets.
But there were no early wickets, not even a chance.
He's freeing himself up now, and that's the first 6 of the morning.
The Pakistani openers, Imam Al-Haq and Mohammad Hafiz, posting a near-flawless 205-run stand.
He goes over the top, hitting with the spin and into the seats.
Before Nathan Lyon got the breakthrough in yesterday's final session.
The opening partnership has been broken.
Hafiz eventually falling for 126.
It's given. Second one down.
Pakistan losing 3 wickets for 56 in the third session.
Most test matches go for 5 days over here to get a result, so we're planning on going the full length. Hopefully winning, late in day 5. That's the plan.
And a plan that most likely involves dealing with the intense Dubai heat. Sean Giles, ABC News.
In motor racing, there was a bit of soul-searching today in the wake of yesterday's Bathurst 1000 after the champion driver David Reynolds was forced to quit the race after it became apparent he was dangerously tired. Reynolds was cleared to drive at speeds of up to 300 kilometres per hour, though he'd had just 4 hours sleep. And the incident has raised concerns about the mixed messages to young drivers.
while Craig Lowndes and his co-driver Stephen Richards celebrated their 12th combined win at Bathurst. The distressing images of a cramped and exhausted David Reynolds became a major talking point during the race.
As the main driver in the car, you don't want to be letting your team down, and maybe Dave felt a bit of that going on. But I guess it's up to the individual team to look after the best interests of their drivers.
The 2017 champion admitted even before the race that he wasn't in peak condition, operating on just 4 hours sleep.
You're not only putting the car at harm's way, you're putting yourself in harm's way. In a place like Bathurst, you can't afford to go a millimetre wrong. My pride is not that big to want to finish a race.
The Erebus team let Reynolds decide if he was well enough to continue hitting speeds of well over 300 kilometres an hour, but they ultimately took it out of his hands, acting once his cramping resulted in a pit lane penalty, replacing him with co-driver Luke Youlden on lap 146.
Probably first 15 laps, I wasn't mentally there. My body gave up after that.
The scene unfolded as New South Wales government-backed television ads broke up the telecast, urging drivers on the state's roads to not trust their tired self.
How tired are you?
Even at the lead end, that they can be impacted by fatigue, and they had to manage that during the race. And so we need to manage it ourselves on the road.
The Confederation of Australian Motorsport says an independent doctor who was on hand could lodge an incident report over the next few days, but it appears unlikely that Reynolds would be made to miss any racing.
He even said to me I should have just got Luke in when I started getting a spasm in my leg, and you know, Dave knows what happened, he knows what he did, and I doubt he'll do it again.
Reynolds now has just over a week to recover before the next round of the season on the Gold Coast. Glenn Lauder, ABC News.
Top-level basketball is back this weekend and all eyes are on the NBL star recruit Andrew Bogut. Bogut has signed with the Sydney Kings and was the star attraction at the league's season launch. The 33-year-old has had a number of injuries during his career, including a broken leg last year. But he says he's made good use of the pre-season and is expecting plenty of game time.
I feel really good. I haven't missed a practice session. Haven't had a game or two missed through rest, which is a coaching staff decision, but haven't had any niggles bothering me, which has been a real positive sign.
The Women's National League also starts this weekend. And now with the weather, here's Paul Higgins.
And Ian, we've had a nice, warm and mostly sunny start to our season of daylight saving, and tomorrow, some rain. A mile 15 overnight in Mildura, but down as low as 2 at Omeo and Mount Hotham Airport. Showers mostly in the west this afternoon, and a few thunderstorms popped up there as well. 6 millimetres is the highest fall at Bullingarook near Gisborne, but that will soon change. Mildura and Swan Hill with the hotspots today with 31 degrees. We haven't had a run of warm days like this in Melbourne since April. Today's city high 28.2 at 3:43 this afternoon. That's 8.5 degrees above normal. Not as wet in Sydney today, but still breezy. They've had 90 millimetres of rain there since Friday. Severe thunderstorms were active today over southeast Queensland. And there's that low that's been sitting off Sydney and producing all the rain. Moving into Western Victoria is mid-level cloud from the combination of a surface and upper-level trough. It'll cross Victoria tomorrow as this low heads northwards. Then on Wednesday, strong southeasterly winds coming our way with the high ridging to the south of us. We'll take a closer look at tomorrow's rain in Victoria in a moment. Another trough should bring some rain here on Sunday and Monday. Tomorrow should be dry at last in Sydney. Adelaide could have some morning showers. Afternoon showers for Hobart and Canberra, and in Perth and Brisbane, late showers and storms. Back home overnight and in the morning, showers will become more widespread. There'll be thunderstorms also in the west with, as you can see, some heavy falls possible if you wind up underneath one, especially over southern parts of the Mallee and the Wimmera. 8 to 20 millimetres for Horsham, 3 to 10 millimetres in the south and much of the north, but less than 5 millimetres in the northeast, and a cooler southerly wind change will move in from the west. A southerly wind on the bays at 10 to 20 knots and a strong wind warning for all coastal waters. Well, some very heavy showers are just starting to pop up around Melbourne right now. Some particularly nasty ones. I can't see it out the window here at the moment. More showers tomorrow, and they could start from mid-morning into the afternoon and evening. 1 to 4 millimetres of rain then, and a top of 19. And there's a road weather alert for the slick roads after the long dry spell. Wednesday becoming sunny 18. Thursday a cool morning, then a sunny 19. Friday mostly sunny and 22 for Hendo's first day of retirement. Saturday partly cloudy, a slight chance of a shower and a north wind 24 degrees. degrees. Then on Sunday, 1 to 6 millimetres of rain with showers and a fresh north wind. And at this early stage, more showers next Monday and between 3 and 15 millimetres of rain, Ian.
Very welcome it will be too, Paul. Thank you. And now Laura Tingle is standing by with 7:30.